Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Anime Night in the Dojo. Today's featured show, Jujutsu Kaisen, Season 3.
Yep, Jujutsu Kaisen, Season 3, Episode 8. Welcome back to the dojo. I'm Ryu. That's Age. Our schedule's fucked. That's just where we are. So, last time, Yuji kicked somebody in the nuts. I mean, look at it. All he needs is the orange afro and the sunglasses. If you guys don't know that reference, there's plenty of early internet shenanigans that you could watch if you're a fan of people being kicked in the nuts. It's kind of like at the Ashton Kutcher thing from, geez, that was like a decade ago now. Everybody's old now. It's just how it is. Everybody is literally old.
And even Family Guy did it. You just got kicked in the nuts skit.
Yeah. That's probably the most recent one. And even that's pretty old at this point. That was from like 2010 or something. So, 15 years ago. No problem. But, yeah, no matter who you are, if you got nuts to kick, you're probably going to go down. So, yeah, the classic. But,
That's my purse.
Yeah, I don't know you. And then you end up with a joke callback in the, reboot of King of the Hill. But, yeah, either way, two truths and a lie. At the end of last time, we talked about the Scorpion Girl. She's obviously lying, so Fushiguro is probably definitely not going to Higuruma. And Yuji's guy might actually be taking them there. Who knows? We'll just have to see. But based on the title of this episode, it is part 2 of at least 3, because next time, or the next episode, is Tokyo Colony number 1, part 3. So, yeah. This is going to be a minute. I assume we'll be getting this one character that I don't know the guy's name, but I assume it's probably Higuruma. But there's some things that came out about him when the sub first hit. So we'll talk about that if it happens in this episode. But that's like the only spoiler I have for the rest of this part is him. So I don't know his name. I just know what the guy looks like. So yeah. Anyway. We're going to push some buttons and get going, so people on Patreon will see you on the other side of the edit for the time reaction, and people on YouTube will see you on the other side for the discussion and review. So push buttons, watch whatever you want. Links are where they need to be, Patreon, YouTube, whatnot. So here goes something. Well, alrighty, then you guys have it. We got some more insight well, not really more, but actual insight into how the Japanese legal system functions. And it's nothing new for me and Age, because we're majorly into the Persona series, and they went really hard into that, especially in Persona 5. So, if you're new to the Japanese legal system, this was a pretty reasonable crash course into how things are handled. That 99% prosecution rate and success rate on guilty verdicts is, yes, that's how it is, because they don't waste their time taking things to trial that aren't like slam dunks. You know what I mean? So in the case of Higuruma here, being a defense attorney is, you're basically just the warm body in the room, like, yeah, I'm here to present the defense. That doesn't matter.
Generally speaking, the only time the defense wins is when there's some sort of massive oversight. Like there was in this case, but they still decided to just kind of sweep it under the rug anyway.
Right. Which, at the end of the day, it's pseudo corruption for what it is, because even if that, not the drunk driving guy, that one, if you want to think about that case for a second, it's generally speaking, I'm using the American justice system in this case. When you're talking about coercion, it's irrelevant because you still made the conscious decision to drink and then drive. It doesn't matter if somebody told you to do it. It would only be like admissible in court if they literally had you on puppet strings and they were controlling you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like the only way you could actually get away with it under coercion is if it's like
they had a gun to your head. You know what I mean? They were threatening you, like they had a gun to your wife or something, your friend, whatever. They had like a hostage and they demanded you do it. Just saying, hey man, come on, just drink with us, and then, hey, you drive us home. That's, no. It has to be an extreme circumstance.
The only time coercion generally gets you out of a sentence, it might get you a later sentence, but the only time it ever actually gets you out of a sentence is when it is like an extreme case, like, someone with a hostage or someone threatening your own life and stuff like that. But if it's literally just someone bullying you or friggin' just manipulating you into doing something, then chances are you're still gonna get tried for it. The most you can really do is hopefully bring them down with you.
Yeah, pretty much. And you see that a lot in like plea deals and stuff like that in the US, where it's like, if you give up your buddies, we'll give you a lighter sentence. You know what I mean? As like, say, the wheelman or whatever. But I mean, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, like in that previous case where the whole thing was that, all of the rest of them coerced him into first joining them for drinking and then being the one who drove them home, and then he crashed. Either way, he's still getting drunk driving. Nothing Higuruba could do about that. But if it was like an American legal system, then the main thing he would try to do would be try to get them charged as well.
Yeah. But the other major case that they were working on with the murder thing, the murder trial, that was just 100% corruption, straight up. That was just them going like, well, that means we have to go look for somebody who's been missing for years at that point, potentially. So no, we're just like, no, we're just gonna get this guy. It doesn't matter. They don't want to do the work, you know what I mean, in that case. There's even in like,
that was the 1% case of they had a massive oversight and got the wrong guy. But at that point, it would have just been too much time and effort on their part, so they just decided to charge him anyway.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, they're looking for justice for the family. And this guy that they had no family, was in a weird working situation, which again, I mentioned the 50,000 yen. I thought they said 500,000. I thought he was paying basically like $5,000 a month for a single room, but no, it's $500. But still, that in a single room like that, wherever he was in Japan, that's still a pretty reasonable amount of money. You know what I mean? For a single room.
Most single room apartments in Japan, I believe, are like 250, 300-ish.
Yeah.
But the fact that they weren't paying him in the first place, and then they were also charging him for his room.
Yeah. So that's a whole other problem. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's really unfortunate for that guy, obviously, but because not a person of power and or money, which those two things usually go hand in hand, and is definitely just a random, really hate to use this term, but a throwaway person. They're just like, nah, he did it. You know what I mean? And you see that all the time. And it's really shitty.
It was mostly corruption on their part, but it was also just kind of, a tactical move in that, like, we already have a bunch of negative opinions from the public, like that we go through that whole bit of like seeing the people on the cell phones and stuff like that, of like just a whole bunch of people like all getting upset about the fact that, oh no, the guy's getting away with it kind of thing. Because even if, regardless of what the trial says, once again, if something makes it to trial, the person's already deemed guilty, usually by the court. But that makes it to where the public also thinks, well, if he made it to the trial, then chances are he's already guilty. So if he's getting off with it, then chances are something is going on behind closed doors to allow him to get away with it.
Right.
Not that he's actually innocent.
Yeah. And once again, that's kind of the danger of stuff like that, of that kind of system, is the public doesn't have all the information. You know what I mean? They're not given the evidence. They're not given a chance to like look at it for themselves. You know what I mean? They've just been, it's been beaten into them culturally that, hey, if this thing goes to trial, they're, like 99% of the time they're guilty. You know what I mean? That 1% is like insane circumstances of like, stuff you're not gonna ever see. You put money on it there's like 10,000 to 1 odds over here, and you put $10 on it and you're good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if some if something ever goes to trial and the person actually comes out innocent, it was either some massive fuck up on the prosecution's end or some form of corruption on the defense's end that allowed them to get the person off.
Yep. So it's definitely an interesting system. Is it perfect? No, but it's the legal system. No legal system is really perfect. I mean, I mentioned appeals during the reaction there, and it's like the reverse of the American system in a way, but the prosecution in Japan is allowed to appeal because they're trying to get that guilty verdict, obviously. And they did mention that they could have gone to a final, what would probably be like our equivalent in America anyway of like the Supreme Court, wherever you live, if you have something that's equivalent to taking something to the Supreme Court, like the end all be all court. You know what I mean? Like in Japan, it would be like the Diet or whatever. So yeah, but they didn't get to that point because, because Hiruma went ham in the courtroom, apparently. So we don't really know what happened there.
Presumably, he let his Shikigami go ham, because from what we see, like briefly in the preview, his Shikigami basically is its own justice system of like you make your case and then it determines whether you live or not.
Yeah. So that's also his Shikigami is called the Judge Man, and that just gave me freaking Yu-Gi-Oh flashbacks. So that's something. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what his deal is, because since we're sitting here on this, if this is when he awakened as a sorcerer during, this could have been, during that event, that could have been like 31st of October right there. He's within 10-ish days, give or take, because the whole 19-day rule thing. Within 10 days of awakening as a sorcerer, he has freaking domain expansion with no training.
Yeah, he awoke as a cursed user here, which this is at most like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Because it was like the newly awakened sorcerers awoke between Gojo being sealed and the culling game starting.
Yeah. As
a result of like some like freaking cursed energy shenanigans that Kenjaku released once he got a hold of Idol Transfiguration.
Yeah.
From eating mojito.
Right. So this is like they never really went into it, but obviously the main takeaway here is domain expansion is a big freaking deal.
Yeah.
So being able to pull that off that quickly is Gojo would probably be raising his eyebrow at it like, man, nobody's done that since me.
Yeah, generally like the three big universal techniques that are all a big deal to learn are domain expansion, black flash, and simple domain.
Yep.
Which domain expansion is, it's supposed to be like basically the ultimate manifestation of your curse technique. Black flash is an example of like perfect control over cursed energy, and simple domain is the technique to use your own cursed energy to try to cancel out someone's domain expansion.
Yep. So either way, this is definitely a fairly interesting situation across the board. We got that like backstory with like Yuji when he was in middle school and stuff like that. So that was something, it was kind of
this
nice
was
to do this just as like a break in the episode, that kind of thing, because I don't think they're done with this character here.
They portrayed him as potentially being more dubious than he actually was in the previous episode, but this episode, getting the bit of backstory on him, he's just one of those kind of guys who just goes with the crowd. He's a sheep.
Yeah.
He's got more personality to him and like some actual morals to him, but he still just ultimately prefers to go with the herd than to actually act on his individuality.
Right. So I don't think we're done with him, but we'll just have to see what they do with him in the future. And then the other side of this episode besides this really weird thing with him and Tub, and you know, that is what it is. I mean, I've never had to deal with that. I've never been like thrown into a pool fully clothed before, so I don't know what that's like. But you know, I've been like wet in the rain before, so fairly wet in the rain before, so it is pretty gross. So I don't know if I'd want to do it, especially in like, you know, what would be like $1,000 suit.
Yeah, I've swam clothed before, but I've never like showered or bathed clothed.
So yeah, I don't know what that's like. I know it's probably a kind of an ordeal to swim in like heavy clothing, stuff like that, like he was talking about from like elementary school and whatnot. So that might be a reasonable skill to learn, just in case you're, you know, ever thrown into the ocean fully clothed or something and you swim back. You're not gonna just be floating there taking your pants off. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the biggest thing is like going overboard on a ship or crashing a car into water.
Yeah.
Those are the two biggest cases where knowing how to swim with clothes on is a big deal, because yes, it is significantly harder to swim with clothes, because the clothes not only just get in the way in general, but they heavily weigh you down.
So they you know, counteract your natural buoyancy, which is a problem.
Yeah, the more clothes you're wearing, the faster you sink. So therefore, the more effort you have to put to swing to the surface.
Yep.
Or just staying on the surface, even.
Yeah. So that was what it was. That was a thing. But what we had on the other side was Fushiguro meeting Reggie, who I don't know what he is doing with whatever he's wearing. Like, obviously, he is a reincarnated sorcerer. We got that. He kind of reminds me of the girl from Naruto who her like main jutsu technique was like paper, like folding paper, and it looks like that's what his body's covered in. It's like the paper they use to like make origami, you know, the like that kind of paper. So
my immediate thought when he came out and dressed like this was Calendar Man.
Yeah, Calendar Man. Yeah. Somebody better call Kite Man. We need him removed, but I don't think Kite Man could handle Reggie, so we'd probably need somebody better. This guy from the DC verse.
Yeah, like Reggie was saying here, most of the weaker sorcerers have already been weeded out.
Right. Plus side though, if Kite Man was in the calling game, he wouldn't die on impact because he'd have his kite. Reggie points out like when they're like thrown into the colony like battle royale style, it's like some of them don't make it. It's like, well, if they don't have the physical ability to like hero land or, you know, like slam into a building and like catch themselves somehow, or like the guy that Yuji's kicking in the nuts over here, it has, you know, their technique is like a helicopter, or like his partner that was like the fighter jet. Then if you have like no capability of flight or can't summon like a Shikigami that's like a parachute or something, then yeah, you're just going to literally crash and burn.
Yeah, the freaking battle royale drop serves multiple purposes, one of which is to weed out the Jeans with no landing strategy.
Yeah, so you know, well, with the whole Kite Man joke, unless you're full Kite Man, then you're in trouble. But yeah, that's what I'm getting off of Reggie here. Is it'll be interesting to see if his technique is like paper based. You know what I mean? Something like that. So it should be interesting to see what his deal is.
Yeah, it's either somehow paper related, or the reason why I say like Calendar Man is it potentially is like prediction related, and like he uses the paper to keep track of his predictions.
Right.
Or something.
Yeah. So there's definitely a lot of characters that will be coming, like that we see in the intro and stuff like that. That'll, you know, they'll be characters, whether or not they're like villains of the week. We'll just have to see. We talked about the girl with the scorpion like hair, that kind of thing. Obviously, she has some kind of deal for whatever. We'll probably have to get more into it. But I think they're both severely underestimating Fushiguro here. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with these two simultaneous fights.
Yeah, like the scorpion hair chick definitely underestimates Fushiguro. Reggie, however, like immediately recognizes that he's strong. So how accurately he can figure Fushiguro's strength, we don't know.
Yeah.
But once again, he's a reincarnated sorcerer, so he's potentially very strong himself.
Yep. And since the last time we've seen Fushiguro go all out, he has improved.
Mhm.
And he should maybe not have perfected his domain expansion, but he can certainly use it. You know what I mean? On top of all the other stuff that he's learned since he had to go all out against the curse painting thing. So
yeah,
it will be a thing. But yeah, another solid episode for what it was. We got 2 big fights coming up, and obviously the spoiler for me was the fact that everybody is like basically taking Higuruma and being like, yeah, he's just the new Nanami.
Yeah, he's Nanami 2.0.
Yeah, he's Nanami 2.0. So, yep. How does it feel to be replaced, man? What they need to do is they need to get the guy from the previous gen of Pokemon that everybody was obsessed with, like the crazy like overtime guy, and then he can be the ultimate character.
Gary.
Yeah.
I can never remember. It was either Gary or Larry.
But Larry.
Yeah.
I remember because Larry from X Achievement Hunter was always making fun of it.
Yeah. The freaking the totally normal gym leader.
Yeah, the totally normal average like office worker guy.
Definitely not a member of the Elite Four.
Definitely not a member. Not definitely not like, you know, he's like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. Totally not a god.
He's totally using more than 1% of his power when you fight him.
Yep. So yeah, this should be pretty interesting across the board. It'll be interesting to see how Yuji handles this. And yeah, we got that stinger of Kenjaku at the end. You know, talking to what we presume to be the higher ups. You know, like the whatever you want to call them, the members of the Jujutsu board. I don't know.
They've always just been referred to as the higher ups.
Yeah, just the higher ups.
Jujutsu.
Yeah. So we'll just have to see. And whether or not they talk ever, who knows? I'm sure there's a reason behind them not actually speaking. It probably has to do with curse techniques and other things. So we'll just have to see.
There's probably some form of pact in play for anyone who simply even just enters this meeting room.
Right. So hopefully you guys can read lips, but luckily for us, we have subtitles. So yeah. We'll probably be okay unless Crunchyroll F's up the base again, which, well, that's nothing new for Crunchyroll, so I'm not gonna be surprised. But as time goes on, I'm recognizing more and more kanji. So you know, probably in a year or two, I could probably vaguely understand what something says without having to, you know, have the subtitle. So either way, that's all I got for this one. It was a reasonable episode. Nothing overly spectacular, but I think it flowed well, and you know, the backstory stuff, that was cool. The poor like assistant attorney woman, that was pretty funny. Kind of like
that's the main. Yeah, like that's the main question for the trial situation is like what happened to her.
Yeah,
because she was in the trial when he activated his Shikigami.
Yep.
But clearly he didn't have any sort of ill will towards her.
Yeah. So we'll just have to see. But next time Yuji's on trial, and he's already asking for an appeal, that does not bode well for our dude. So, anything else, Age?
Really, the only other thing we didn't talk about that I can think of was just the whole thing with their whole plan targeting curse users and not the reincarnated. When Reggie very clearly quickly points out the flaw in that of like the reincarnated sorcerers are the ones who have more idea of what's actually going on because they actually have history with Kenjaku and know more of his motivation than Tengen just speculating.
Right. So yeah, it's a plan. We'll just have to see. But you know,
because like Reggie brings up, the ritual that Tengen was talking about is probably a plan from Kenjaku, but it's probably more like plan C or plan D if nothing else works.
Right.
But this is probably closer to whatever his primary plan A is, which is probably something to do with strong arming the Jujutsu higher ups into something towards his whole like goal of trying to elevate everyone into sorcerers.
Yep. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, people of YouTube beyond, have you're watching. As always, we appreciate you stopping by and hanging with us here in the dojo for more anime night in the dojo. And this was Jujutsu Kaisen, Season 3, Episode 8. So have a good morning, evening, afternoon. Whatever it is for you. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.
Hey everyone, Victoria here. If you enjoyed the video, please consider pushing those like and subscribe buttons. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thanks again for your time, and we hope to see you again in the future.